All right. Well, welcome to Career Education Live. My name is Denny Doherty, and I have an excellent guest with me today, Dr. Mark Sollosy. And by the way, am I pronouncing your name correctly, Sollosy?
Yes, you are. Close enough for government work anyways.
Okay, I wanted to make sure because sometimes a name, it's pronounced the way it looks, sometimes it's way off, and Sollosy is what I say, but I figured if I'm mispronouncing something in a horrible fashion, don't be afraid to correct me. But Dr. Mark Sollosy is a faculty member in the College of Business, and I've presented to his classes a number of times. And I go out in a typical year, not 2020, because that's anything but a typical year. But I go out during a typical year and I do a lot of classroom presentations, but I've always been very fascinated by some of the things that have come up during the presentations. So that's why I reached out to Dr. Sollosy to join me today to talk about part 2 of our NACE 8 competencies series. Sorry about that. And today we're going to be talking about professionalism and career management. So Dr. Sollosy, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
So anyway, we were chatting before I hit record, and Dr. Sollosy was talking about the importance of staying current and adapting to the market, and actually had a very good comparison between the individual and business. And I was joking with him afterward. I was like, I really wish I hit the record button on that. So would you care to tell us a little bit more about that? That was a fascinating discussion. I really like hearing your thoughts on that.
All right, well, Daniel, as you know, I'm the lead strategy professor here in the College of Business, and I'm also the director of the MBA program. And that's all I basically teach. I teach undergraduate strategy as well as graduate school strategy. So in strategy, we're always talking about how do you make a business competitive? What is the competitive advantage? And one of the couple of the principal theories is the whole area of having capabilities. And dynamic capabilities for a business, the ability to monitor what's going on in the outside world, to change, adapt those capabilities to meet. And as I was thinking, organization with the concept of I, or you, the individual, me, my career, and how do I take my career and make sure that it's constantly moving forward. And, understanding, and as I like to tell my undergraduate and even my graduate students, that the first thing they need to keep in mind is the word is commencement, and is used in graduation. And the word commencement does not mean to stop, it means the beginning. So upon graduating or commencing from the university, you're just the beginnings of the next phase. And you're coming out with a degree in hand, with some skills, but albeit not really a lot of skills and not any real depth. You've touched a lot of things, but you really haven't had a chance to perfect or even come close to refining those skill sets yet. So there is a need to constantly be ongoing and refreshing. So when you take the concept of this dynamic capabilities that I teach and talk about for organizations, I'm saying, well, as people, we have to constantly look at what are our capabilities. We're all competing, be it for a job or a position in an organization, and that competition environment, quite frankly, if we would compare last year at this time and this year today, is a much different environment. The skills, the tools, the toys, whatever you used a year ago that you thought would make you competitive in the marketplace, probably don't apply as well as they do today. I mean, today you need a whole different skill set. So as an individual, you need to constantly be looking at what are my skills, what do I bring, and what makes me different than maybe somebody sitting next to me competing for that position or that promotion within the organization. But not only what do I currently have, but understanding that the lifespan of that advantage is very temporal in nature, very short, and is increasingly getting shorter, so that I can't sit back and just rest on those laurels. So you need to constantly be looking at what is the market going to need in the future? How are things evolving, and therefore what am I going to need to develop? And I think the biggest skill that a university can teach is the need for you as an individual to realize that you have to constantly be learning. you really the role of this graduate, undergraduate education you had is to teach you how to teach yourself. Because going forward, you're not going to have the advantage of a bunch of people with all sorts of initials at the end of their names telling you the things you need to know. The onus is going to shift to you as an individual to have to figure out what are you going to need to know and anticipate what you're going to need to know in the future. So, you're going to constantly have to be looking, how do you refresh those skills to move your career forward? Use myself as an example. I spent almost 30 years in industry before I re-entered academia. So I may show you that maybe I didn't do a great job of career planning. This is how I ended up. But when I look at what I started at when I first got out of college or out of grad school, I was in marketing. And over time, I saw an evolution. This was in the late 70s, early 80s, when computers were beginning to enter mainstream industry. And I began to realize that we as a country, we as a nation, were moving away from a manufacturing base more into an information base, a knowledge base, and that maybe it was important to understand how computers operated. So I evolved into that area, and I'm not a programmer. I never knew how to program, but I understood how computers could be used, how information needed to be used. And I spent my career evolving through there that I actually ended my career in industry in the executive suite as a chief information officer and a chief operating officer. Now, if somebody had said to me prior, that's what I'd be doing, I would have looked at them and said, no, well, what are you talking about, these computer things? I mean, I was maybe watching an old episode of Star Trek. I didn't know what a computer was, and how things are evolving forward. So I think, in today's day and age, you need to constantly be evolving. Having said that, though, there are two, I think, immutable skill sets that we have to have regardless. Industry is constantly talking about it. I know we wrestle about it at the College of Business, because when we sit with our advisory board, a lot of times we're getting the feedback, well, we need you to be teaching on the soft skills. So then we ask them, what do you mean by the soft skills? And then, if I get a little bit of a definition, I'll sometimes tell them, well, that's not what we're geared to do. That's not our charter. That's not what we're trained to do. We're trained to teach very, very hard types of skills. We teach marketing, we teach accounting, we teach finance. We're not necessarily there to teach the quote unquote softer skills. But what do they mean by softer skills is the ability to communicate in a very effective, forthright manner, to be able to intelligently formulate an argument, articulate it in a non-threatening manner, and to have those skills both from an oral perspective, but equally as important, and something that seems to be lost in translation lately, written. The world of business, and I don't care, you may not be a business major now, you might be coming out with a degree in psychology or biology or philosophy. Those worlds still rely upon written documents, and those documents are not written as text messages. They're not done in 128 character tweets, but they are written and well-formulated English constructs. So you need to know how to write in a solid manner. And unless you're writing a novel, you do not need to know how to write in a very flowing manner. Matter of fact, business people, and again, I don't care what your background is, you are going to be working in a business at some point in time. Those people that you're working for or working with don't want to read a lot of flowing language. They want to read things very tight, very concise, and to the point. So one of the common threads, regardless of what you do in your career, is keeping up that ability to communicate in an effective manner. Now, what we've found, and I was sharing with Danny a little earlier, are some articles I just recently bumped into. What we've found is the pandemic has created another whole high-valued skill set. Again, regardless of what your profession might be or what your career path may be, that newly developed skill set is how to operate in a virtual environment.
Yeah.
I think this virtual environment, whether you like it, you hate it, or you're ambivalent about it, aspects of it are here to stay. And your ability to communicate in this type of environment, it's very easy to get lost in isolation, to retreat. So you need to be able to take advantage of the technology. It doesn't mean that you have to be an expert in the technology, but you need to at least be familiar with it, know how to conduct yourself, be it in a Zoom environment or a Teams environment or whatever other type of virtual environment may be present today or in the future. There's an etiquette involved. There's a way to present. Yes, you can be sitting at home in your pajama bottoms and your bunny slippers on, but at least a part of the camera sees you probably be in a more professional attire. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm sitting here with a very nice t-shirt on, but I got a pair of sweats on underneath because you can't see them, and I'm comfortable, I'm at home, so there's no need. But I mean, so these are skills that are going to be developed more and more. So this virtual collaboration. I know one of the things Denny and I were talking about even before this was, gee, we miss the interaction of sitting in a room with people and being able to have a discussion. I know as a professor, I miss the electricity of the classroom, where I can look in the eyes of my students as we're going on and figure out whether or not they get it. I can see it in the expressions on their face, the way they respond, which is another important thing to know. But when you get into this type of environment, you lose that. And the onus shifts. The onus shifts from an educational perspective. For those of you still in school, professor can't see you or can't really get a sense of what you're doing. So you have to take more responsibility for your learning. You can't be passive anymore. And I think in some ways this is good. I think we've become too passive in the educational process, and we need to get back into creating active learners, because you're going to need that active learner to tie back into what I said at the very beginning. You've got to continually educate yourself, upgrade your skills if you want to be successful. I think the other thing that comes into play, and is an aspect we talk about in strategy, is ambidexterity. If you understand the term, it means left hand, right hand, is how most people think about it. From a business perspective, we talk about the dichotomy between exploiting things, using what you have to the maximum ability, and exploring avenues to move a company forward. And I think the same holds true for us as individuals. As you're out there in your career, you have to be ambidextrous in the sense that you have to be able to exploit the skill sets that you have that got you that position, so that you can keep that position and maintain that position, while simultaneously exploring what new skills, what new opportunities may be needed to move forward in your chosen career. So again, there's that balancing act. Now, that doesn't say you have to do both of those equally well at all times. You may have to rotate back and forth, and there's a bunch of theories about how companies do that. But the important thing is that we as individuals, as I said, I didn't start off doing what I'm doing now. Was it conscious and a conscious effort? If I want to be braggadocious about it, I goes, oh yeah, I saw this coming, and I planned for it. In reality, no, it was as much dumb luck and opportunistic as anything else. I mean, I tell my students today that I did not plan for my career, but the one thing I did learn is, if opportunity knocks at the door, you enter the door even if you're stark naked. Find out what's on the other side of the door, because you can always say no after you hear what the opportunity is, but at least take the time to hear what the opportunity is. I mean, I started out, I'm a kid from Boston, went to undergraduate school in Boston, did my initial grad work in Washington, D.C., thought I would spend my life in D.C. An opportunity presented it myself. I moved to San Francisco. That led to an opportunity to do a $200 million startup with the Prudential Insurance Company in New Jersey. I was the second employee to do that. From that, opportunities presented themselves to run a company in Los Angeles. And then other opportunities presented themselves that got me to Amarillo, Texas, where I was the chief information officer for the world's largest company in the area of risk and management. And then one thing led to another, and I found myself teaching at the university in Amarillo, West Texas A&M. And something I said I'd never do. And then one thing led to another, and I find myself back at school getting a doctorate. Was it planned? No. So, this ability to, or this ability to seize opportunities, recognize opportunities, take a little bit of chance. I mean, you should have, I would hope, sufficient sense of your own being, of your own abilities, to be willing to take the risk. If you can't bet on yourself, who can you bet on? I mean, that's the safest risk to take. So be willing to take the risks. You never know. Will you fail sometimes? Yeah, but there's as much to learn from that failure as the success. I mean, I often say, I think, and I've been fired, and think, sometimes everybody needs to be fired at least once in their career, because it makes you really stop and think. What are you doing? Where are you going?
That's good.
So if you're going to have the question, that was a rather long thesis, but you never ask a college professor to give you short answers. You don't expect those.
No, I like that. There's so much good stuff in there. I like the part about opening the door, the opportunity in the door, even if you're naked. And the story about being fired, the introspection that goes along with that. There's just so much good stuff in there, so much good advice. And a couple of the questions I kind of had in mind, I wanted to jump into a little bit. I think you touched on a lot of these very well, but I just want to maybe pick your brain on them a little bit more. So we'll go ahead. Let's talk a little bit about let's say professionalism. I'm going to start kind of down the list because, as you know, I sent you a couple of questions, a couple of things for us to chat about here. So I know you've had some thoughts about like the soft skills and things like that. Now, NACE, National Association of Colleges and Employers, that's an organization that my department looks to quite frequently for support, for educational materials, for webinars, because what NACE, it's in the name, colleges and employers. They help departments like mine who kind of bridge the gap between what happens across Fifth Avenue over here at the university and what happens for students anywhere else in the world they go. So NACE they do surveys all the time. They talk to industry leaders. That's one thing I like about the organization. I really respect them a lot for that. And a lot of the surveys have suggested that many employers do not feel students are ready for the workplace, and in particular, professionalism is something they can lack. So I was wondering what your thoughts on that are, and also maybe, because I know in your career, I'm sure you probably worked with a number of younger professionals. So maybe if you can tie in some real life examples, and I'm just eager to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, the concept of professionalism has evolved greatly. I mean, when I started, professionalism required a suit, a tie, a briefcase, shiny shoes, showing up neat. And now that's changed. I mean, dress can be more casual, but I still think you need to be professional in your attitude, which includes professional language. I've worked with people that could make longshoremen blush with their language, and that, if you were to talk to HR professionals, they'll tell you that comes under the heading of a hostile work environment. Unless you're working on the docks, maybe it's not appropriate language. So, keep the language and your attitude appropriate to the environment in which you're in. Dress, I mean, particularly if you're first starting out, better to slightly overdress than underdress. You can always step it back. I mean, I've always told students, if you're going out for that first interview, if you're a man or male, go in a suit and tie. If you're a woman, go in a business attire. If you get there and they're casual, you can always take off the tie. You can always be a little bit more relaxed. Give them the respect. I mean, part of dressing properly is to show a certain degree of respect for them, and it's also showing you have respect for yourself. So for that professionalism, part of it is dress, appearance, facial hair. I'm looking at I'm looking at the screen, I'm seeing that. I've got some on right now. Normally I don't, but just under the pandemic, where I think everybody's growing something under a pandemic, if nothing else, just to see something move forward. But if, facial hair is fine, but, make sure it's neatly taken care of. Tattoos and piercings have become more common, but, not everybody wants to see them initially in the workplace. Find out what the environment is. So if you have them and you can discreetly cover them until you get there, that may be in your best interest as well, having been somebody who hired. Don't forget, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And, you need to make sure that better to be maybe considered a little too conservative than to be considered too radical initially, until you get a sense of what the organizational culture is like. Some cultures are very, very, very relaxed. Fine. Others are still, depending on what you're doing. If you're working for an accounting firm, they don't like real relaxed, because what they do is dealing with money. Banks aren't looking for real relaxed, but if you're working in a museum, fine. Maybe they are looking for something more relaxed, more laid back. So that professionalism has to do a lot with appearance. It has a lot to do with carriage of yourself, how you carriage, look people in the eyes. I know a lot of may be uncomfortable doing that, but we need to learn to do that. When employers say that they don't feel that students are necessarily equipped professionally, part of it is that the academic, the college years are a lot more loose than they were when I was in college. I'll be quite honest about it. When somebody gives you a deadline in business, they mean that time. It's not, you can't come to them like you come to your professors and say, well, gee, the dog ate my homework or whatever, can I have an extra half hour? As I used to say in industry, when somebody came to me, unless it was a legitimate emergency, that an unexpected emergency came to me, I say, their failure to plan did not constitute an emergency for me. If I gave somebody a deadline, it was probably because I had a deadline imposed upon me, and I needed them to meet their deadline to give me the time I needed so I could meet my deadline. So, a lot of this is that when people ask for things, they mean it. So a professional attitude is to make a commitment to actually, in many ways, under-promise but over-deliver.
That's good.
If you think that the assignment can be done in 2 days and they're asking you how long it could take, maybe you tell them it's going to be 3 days and then deliver it in 2. Give yourself a little bit of slack there. So professionalism is, you don't want to go the other way, say, well, I think it's going to be 2 days, so I'm going to do it in a day and a half. No, it just doesn't work that way. I kid my students because I give them all the assignments they need to know. And there's always a couple of things they need to do by the end of the semester. And I keep telling them, start it now. I know how the semester is going to start. You're going to say, this is the semester where I'm going to get ahead of all those papers and do all those things that I'm supposed to do. And as we enter into the end of the fall semester, I'll do them over Thanksgiving break. No, so you're all trying to cram around to the last week, getting 3 papers written and study for 2 finals. It may work in academia, but it does not work that way in industry. So professionalism is to be able to budget your time, allocate your time, manage your time in a way that is focused and getting the job done. That doesn't mean you have to give up a personal life. Just know how long things need to be done. The people who give up their personal life are usually those who don't know how to manage their time. Because they find themselves then having to do things when their buddies are out doing whatever because they couldn't get the stuff done at the work.
Yeah, that's good. So actually, I love everything you said, and a couple of things about the new semester resolutions. A couple of those things kind of hit close to home. So I had some flashbacks to about 12, 13 years ago as an undergrad. I'm like, yeah, I've done a few of those and maybe not lived up to those new semester resolutions that I put upon myself. And actually, I thought of a question. It's a little bit off the script, but I think you really alluded to this well. It sounds like something like, if we're talking about professionalism, it sounded like if I was going to come work for you in a professional setting, something you'd really want from me would be accountability, to take accountability for my actions. And just that's a big part of or being a professionalism. So do you feel that's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hiring you to do a job. You need to take ownership. If you get fired because of those type of issues, then you have no place to look but into the mirror. Yeah, now sometimes people get laid off for no reasons that are own. I mean, just look what the pandemic has done. A lot of people have lost their jobs. I've been caught in a downsizing where the company policy was last one in, first one out. I had my boss look at me and says, I don't want to lose you, but I have no choice. I got 2 other people ahead of you I'd rather get rid of, but I have no choice. But if you lose your position or whatever because you didn't follow through, there's only one place to look, and that's in the mirror. So yeah, professionalism is make a commitment, be responsible, take accountability. As I tell managers, you can delegate authority, but you cannot delegate responsibility.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. And really for me, I think about those things. Maybe just the department I work in, career ed, maybe that causes me to think about them more than the average, speech teacher here, for instance. Because as we discussed, I teach on an adjunct basis communication classes. But I feel like for me, that's one reason. I don't know if I want to state it like this, that I want to be hard on students. But one reason I want to hold students accountable, one reason I want to set deadlines and hold students accountable to that is they're not, if I just have an attitude of, yeah, just turn in whenever, you didn't follow the direction, you tried, and I think very rarely, if ever, is that's going to be the attitude you find in business. So in a way, I feel like we're failing students if we're too easy on them. I mean, I figure you probably would feel the same way, but do you have any other thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it comes down to, I know it's somewhat cliche nowadays, but in industry, not everybody gets a trophy.
Yeah.
There are no trophies for participation. We're there to do the job, get it done, and we live on timelines. Our customers expect things, our bosses expect. I mean, put yourself in the mindset. If you haven't been able to figure this out as an individual, just think the last time you went in to buy something and you had to wait longer than you anticipated.
Oh yeah.
How do you feel about that? Well, then understand why it's important that you deliver when you commit to deliver.
Yep, definitely. Which, yeah, it's kind of, I like the example you shared before about like under promising, over delivering. I was kind of thinking about it in terms of like an Amazon package. If they tell me it's going to be here Friday and it comes Wednesday, I'm elated, I'm happy, I'm not angry. But if they tell me it's going to be here Wednesday and it comes Friday, then every day I'm checking my phone, where is this package? I need this item. So but at the same time, a college is, when I state it like this, not that you want to fail necessarily, but I'd rather see students have a learning experience here, maybe even if it's a humbling experience, and learn and grow from it here, than us just to pass them through and then to, kind of like you said, lose a job one day when they're supporting a family and own a home and stuff like that, because that could be very, to lose your job, especially if it's due to your actions and it's things you could have done differently and prevented it. I mean, that's, I would imagine, a lot more devastating than getting a bad grade, or something here at a university. So that's what I mean when I say it's okay to fail here. It's you learn, you succeed, you fail sometimes. A university in a way is kind of like a training ground for life in a lot of ways.
Well, that's what I tell my students. I mean, this is what the university is for. This is the safe environment to experiment, to try things. It's okay to fail. Matter of fact, I tell my students at the very beginning of each semester, if you chase grades, you'll learn nothing. But if you chase knowledge, the grade will follow. And that knowledge you'll take and own for forever. So better for you to be in my class and try some things that didn't work and learn from that. First of all, it's a low risk environment. Nobody's losing their job. No real money's at stake.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this is the environment, and I think, unfortunately, And I don't know if this goes back to the No Child Left Behind movement or whatever, but most students spend more time chasing grades than chasing knowledge. So they come out with a 4.0 GPA and know absolutely nothing. But every once in a while, you run into the student that maybe has the 2.5 GPA, but really knows some stuff because they paid attention, they learned. And that's really what the purpose of, I think, an education is. It's to educate to learn, not to, if you come into my class assuming that you're going to get an A, that you know everything you need to know, then my question is, why are you even in my class? You apparently know everything I'm going to have. I am here to teach you, so why bother? Move on to something else.
Yep, absolutely. And of course, failing too. I mean, when I say okay to fail, I mean, there's assignments, but then I'll give you another example was even outside of like academics when I was in college. I mean, there were a couple extracurricular projects I was involved in, and some of them didn't necessarily go as planned. But from like the standpoint of leading a group, those are things I learned. And now if I lead a project here, almost 15 years later, those things that kind of blew up in my face back during undergrad on like an extracurricular project, I know not to do them here. And I was able to fail in a safe environment where, like you said, no millions of dollars weren't on the line and no one really beat me up for doing it. But still, it was a little humbling. I learned something. And I think made me into a better professional today. So I like to tell students, just get involved, and if you trip and fall down, get back up. Cliche, but it's true. So.
Well, I mean, the unfortunate part of it is I think we're better at learning from our mistakes. If we have a tendency, if we make a mistake, we have a tendency to look back, why did we go wrong? But the one thing we don't do, but we also need to do, is learn from our successes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If something went right, why shouldn't we spend as much time analyzing why something went right as we analyzing why something went wrong? There are lessons to be learned on both sides of that coin, but it has a tendency when things go right, we sort of act like we're whistling past the graveyard. It went right. I don't want to jinx that. Everything worked out, as opposed to, well, why did it work out? What did I do, or what were the conditions in the environment that facilitated that happening?
Which is really good too, because you don't want to necessarily get in the mindset of leaving success up to chance. And even if it was chance at one time, I don't know about you. When I play games and stuff, I'm not all that lucky. So even if it was chance, I'm not going to bet on getting lucky twice. So yeah, understanding if something went right, the why behind it is a much better way to duplicate success than, like you said, just rolling the dice and crossing your fingers. So
I mean, ultimately, I think it comes down to that the most important word for all of us, which is unfortunately a word that we have beaten out of us, usually by the time we're about 6. And if any of you have out there either small children or a younger brother or sister, you know what that word is. It's the constant why. Why? Every time you say something to a small kid, they always say what? Why? Well, that is probably the most important word in the English language. And we constantly should be and need to be asking why. And it's often been said that it's not until you ask why 3 times that you get to the real root cause of anything.
That's good. That's really, and yeah, anytime and not that I have any children or even any really nieces or nephews or anything like that. I'm not around small kids a lot, but I have heard that why, and I've had friends with children, and I think they're onto something with that. And a lot of times, if we're doing half a dozen other things, we don't want to answer 50,000 questions. I'm pretty sure I remember as a child driving my parents crazy with that, and then being maybe at a loss because I was kind of analytical. But yeah, it is such a great word. So yeah, and sometimes I think just the simple things like that, not overcomplicating it or making it too philosophical, just getting at that, what's that, three-letter word? Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. So I had like I said, I'm going to try to be mindful of time here. So we got probably 15, 20 minutes or so left. So I wanted to just get your opinion on a few other things here, because we've talked about professionalism a little bit, but of course the other competency I want to talk about today is career management. And at the beginning, you had some really great thoughts on career management. So when we talk about really what career management is, everything from being adept at locating opportunities to investing back into yourself. For me, that's Something I tell students a lot when I do a presentation, doing things like webinars, going to conferences. I tell them I don't want to be the same professional I was even a year ago, let alone 5 years ago when I got to Marshall, or 11 years ago when I started in higher ed. I told them in 2020, if I'm in higher ed operating with a 2009 mindset, I'm hopelessly out of date and it's only going to get worse. So I have to invest back into myself. But in your opinion, what are some ways students can start taking ownership of their careers now, even if they're, say, an undergraduate student?
Well, yeah, it's funny. Before I came to Marshall, I taught at West Texas A&M University outside of Amarillo, Texas, and I often had to do incoming freshman orientation. So the incoming freshmen, they would do their orientation, and the last day, which was the day I was involved with, they'd come in and they'd sit down with a faculty member to plan their first semester schedule. And it was sort of fascinating me, first of all, because there I am sitting, being older than most of the parents, never mind an 18-year-older. But you're sitting there with somebody 18, 19, 20 years old, and they're sitting there trying to make a decision about what they want to be when they grow up. And I was thinking to myself at the time, I was 58 years old, and I hadn't figured out whether or not I wanted to grow up, never mind what I wanted to be. So it's real difficult at 18, 19, 21, 22 years of age to really know what you want to do, because quite frankly, you haven't had sufficient exposure to a lot of things. I mean, I knew what I didn't want to do. I came from a family of accountants. My grandparents were accountants. My mother was an accountant. I knew I did not want to be an accountant, but yet I also grew up in a family that owned a business, and I was sort of fascinated by the whole thing. My initial plan had been to stay with the family business. But one thing led to another, and my father and I didn't see eye to eye on a couple of things. So my revenge was, I said, great, I'm going to grad school. I'm going to go get an MBA. At which point in time I became, in the eyes of a couple of family members, a pariah, because I was the overeducated idiot son at that point. But I mean, I really didn't know. I even when I graduated my MBA, I knew I was in marketing at the time, so I sort of liked marketing. I knew I didn't want to be in sales per se. I just didn't have the personality for it. I always used to say, I mean, I didn't enjoy sales and I wasn't good at sales. I don't know if I wasn't good at it because I didn't enjoy it, or I didn't enjoy it because I wasn't good at it. But the bottom line was, it didn't make any difference. I started off in marketing, and as I said, my career evolved. And I think anybody who, particularly as an undergraduate, looks at me, can look me in the eye and say they know exactly what they want to do in 5 years, is lying. They're just saying it for purposes of an interview. And as somebody who's done a lot of people coming out, I'll often call them on and say, you're lying. You have no idea exactly what you want to be doing, because you don't even know what this job is fully all about and what opportunities it may lend itself to. So from a career management, yeah, pick an area that has interest in you, because obviously if you're in an area that has no interest, it's not going to work out at all. But something that you have interest or curiosity about, maybe that's where you start. But keep yourself flexible. Know that you're going to learn. You have an awful lot to learn. No company hires you expecting you to know everything there is to know. Even the last 10, 15 years of my career where I was being hired into the executive suite, I needed to be trained. I needed to learn. If nothing else, I needed to learn about the culture of the company, their clients, and things of that nature. I might have been hired because I was an expert in some particular technical or operational facet of the business, but there was still a lot of learning. My wife often reminisce that my career, our journey together, was not planned. We ended up places that we never thought we would. As I told you earlier, I've been all over this country. But as a result, we have met some of the most fascinating and interesting people you can imagine. I mean, I count among friends a two-time Academy Award winner, Chief Executive Officer of Baskin-Robbins Ice Cream, a dear friend now who is a serial entrepreneur, not to be confused with breakfast foods, who has owned and started many small businesses, very successful. I mean, it's really the best career management advice I can give you is pick a general direction, but stay flexible. Again, that dynamic capability of adapting and designing what's going on, because quite frankly, particularly the rate of change we're seeing in all industries right now is there's no knowing exactly what a career will look like 5 years from now, or even 3 years from now. What are going to be required? What's it going to look like? What are you going to be doing? I work with one of my colleagues in the college, keeps talking about, the computer zombie apocalypse, how computers are going to take over the world and there'll be massive unemployment. But yeah, others of us look and say, no, it's just going to create a whole new set of opportunities that don't exist today. So, that's part of the career. You are, to quote Dickens, this is the best of times and the worst of times.
Nice.
It's the worst of times right now because things are kind of weird and whatever, a lot of change, but it's the best time because there are opportunities over the horizon we can't even see yet.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's good. That's really good. That's really good. So let's see. Speaking of career management, and I really loved all of your thoughts on that. I think you may have partially answered this question. The question is going to be, what are one or two of the biggest mistakes that you see younger professionals make? And I'm going to guess, based upon that previous answer, that maybe lying to yourself about how much you have figured out or not being flexible enough. I'm going to guess that maybe those are among those answers. But do you care to shed any more insight on that? Just maybe one or two mistakes younger professionals make as far as career management.
Well, I think sometimes they force it. I mean, the biggest problem that everybody has, and I don't care who you are, we've all had this exact problem, is getting that first or second job, because they want experience, but you have no experience, so you're in the you're living the Heller novel of Catch-22. You're there, you can't win. So instead of trying to bluff your way through and build the facade that you can do something that maybe you can't, I think the better approach is to go into those evidences. You're right. I don't have any experience there, but I do bring the experience of learning. And I want to learn everything I can learn. And through that, I will be the best I can be and hopefully one of your best employees. So it's, understanding that you're a tabula rasa, you're a blank slate coming in, but you're a blank slate that's anxious to be written upon.
Oh, that's really good, because I'll tell you something else I've noticed. I have a hunch you'll probably agree with me on this. Well, as we progress through our careers, good things and bad things happen. The good thing is that we get experience, but we also collect baggage. I mean, if we have a job that's maybe a poor fit, or maybe we have a bad manager, maybe we develop bad habits. What I've found is almost everyone I've worked with, we have some kind of work baggage. So to say, it can manifest itself, maybe a bad attitude, maybe unsavory habits, or it could be any number of things. I think those blank slate, fresh out of college employees don't have that. And I really like what you said also, just kind of about leveraging your top selling points. And of course, that would be the openness, the willingness to learn. And because I can't give you a name. I know people in the industry have told me that's something they do love about fresh out of college employees, is there's nothing they have to untrain them on. Yeah, we have to train them, but we don't have to untrain them. So
yeah, very much so.
So all right, excellent. So let's see here. Just pertaining to career management, professionalism, do you have any other thoughts for me? Because I think we've covered a lot of ground today. I've really enjoyed this discussion. I knew it was going to be a good one. That's why I reached out, and this has not disappointed. This has even, I think, exceeded my expectations. But what other thoughts do you have for us today?
Well, I think in today's environment, first of all, stay safe. Don't get frustrated by it all. This too shall pass. We will come out of this, hopefully in the not too distant future, but the landscape will be different. Use this opportunity, use this time as an opportunity to start, if not perfecting, at least learning or developing some of those new skills that have come about. So not only, what you do in the classroom and the material you're learning there, but yeah, I have guys today who just do not like to video conference, but and quite frankly, I'm not a big fan of it either, but it's something we have to do. I mean, you and I were talking earlier that, the lack of personal engagement, if you will, but we do it. I was telling Denny at the beginning, I also teach in our doctorate of nurse anesthesia program, and I just did a presentation for them on entrepreneurship, because most of them will become independent business people once they leave, which is interesting. Here they are going to school to become anesthesiologists, and then all of a sudden they realize that, well, wait a minute, I'm going to be working for myself. I'm going to have to be running my own business because I'm the business. But I told that one of the interesting things I came to realize was that I have found a new non-medicinal form of anesthesia. It's called a Zoom or a Teams meeting, because these things can put you to sleep, or you find yourself putting them up. You're muted yourself, and even maybe you turned off your camera, so you're just an icon somewhere, and you're off doing something else. I mean, and I know that I've talked to some of my colleagues, even when they're teaching, that they'll do things and collaborate or something. And I've talked to the students, says, "Oh yeah, we put them on mute. We're going off. We're doing our ironing. Every once in a while, we'll come in and click on something." But I mean, you do need to learn these skills and how to engage in it, because you may very well find yourself in a situation where you have to contribute in a very, very productive manner in this type of environment. And it will not be unusual. I mean, it became increasingly common, and I think the pandemic has pushed it even further, that initial interviews, if you get enough to get that far to actually get an interview, is not going to be face-to-face. Companies are not going to spend the money to fly you out or things of that nature. They're going to either do it as a telephone interview. I know that's how I was hired initially here at Marshall. The first contact I had was a telephone interview where there were 3 members of the faculty on one end and me on the other end. The technology wasn't quite as robust as it is today. I think today it would not be unheard of to say, all right, we're going to schedule a Zoom interview and we're going to have 3 or 4 people. So you better get comfortable in this environment, I think, in the near term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of just goes back to attitude about it too, because I've told people, I think I've even on Career Ed Live, I think earlier episodes I've even said this, is the stuff, it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, I get really tired of the virtual, but on the other hand, I'm happy we have it, and I don't know where we'd be without it right now. I mean, if a pandemic had happened even 10 years ago, which 10 years doesn't sound like that long of a time, but even 10 years ago, we would have had a much rougher time. 15, 20 or more years ago, it would have been hard. It would have been really hard. So it's a blessing and a curse, but I think, making the best out of it, taking what you can, because that's an opportunity in and of itself, just gaining these skills. But I've also jokingly told, maybe not even so jokingly, told students, putting Zoom and Teams on a resume, it might go the way of Microsoft Word, where it gets to not be something used to stand out, but it gets to be expected, because I still meet people who think that Microsoft Office on a resume is something you use to stand out. I'm like, well, it's good you have it, but to me, it's more of you look bad if you don't have it. You know what I mean?
I think probably for the next six months to a year, to be able to point out, you have a working familiarity with Zoom and Teams, it won't hurt you. 18 months from now, I don't know if it will have the same intrinsic value, but I think in the near term that there is a certain value, because at least you're showing a prospective employer that you've got a familiarity with that environment, because that's how you may be asked to work. Yeah, that's true, and that's, I mean, the virtual work, I mean, that's, at least in the short term, that's probably not going anywhere. I'm hoping, before
much longer, things can look normal. But yeah, if we're measuring it in months, it's probably not going anywhere. So it's good. So do you have any other closing thoughts for us today, or?
Again, just be flexible, be opportunistic, if you will. When an opportunity presents itself, at least evaluate it. It helps if you have a supportive partner, if you're in a relationship. I've been blessed. I know when the opportunity came to Marshall, I was very comfortable at West Texas A&M. The only reason I even went out into the market was there were some budget issues. I could have stayed, it turned out. And I remember coming home to my wife. I had already been offered the position here at Marshall, and I found out I could stay at West Texas. And I had a discussion with the dean there, and he said, "No, you're more than welcome to stay." I remember coming home to my wife and saying, "All right, here's the deal. We've been in Amarillo for 17 years. We have friends. We have, we're well established in the community. We've got a nice life, beautiful home. We can stay. And given our respective ages, this is where we'll probably die. Only because we're getting up there. I'm no spring chicken." I says, "Or we can move to Huntington, West Virginia, and Marshall University." And like every other time before that, she looked at me and she said, "Well, I think we've got at least one more adventure in us." And that's one way to look at it. Is that each of these options. Now I realize, in a couple relationship, when there's more than one person involved, there may be other constraints that have to be taken into consideration. Now, a lot of cases, particularly for new graduates, that's not much the case. But be open. I mean, it's a big country. There's a lot of interesting things out there. Again, I'm a kid from Boston. If anybody had ever said I would retire in West Virginia, I would have looked at this as West where?
Fair enough. So, all righty. Well, Dr. Mark Sollosy, I just want to thank you again for joining me today. I really enjoyed this discussion, and I think there's just so much wisdom in here. So that's why I just hope students will listen and can glean that wisdom. And like I said, again, that's why I reached out to you, because I know just little bits and pieces I picked up from visiting your class to do like a resume presentation. I think that's mostly what I've done for you in the past. Just hearing little bits here and there, I've even thought to myself, man, I wish I was a student in this class. So thinking about people to bring on here and discuss these things, I mean, you came to mind pretty quickly, and I really appreciate you agreeing to do that. So I just want to thank you again so much for your time today. And I just want to thank everyone
for having me. I appreciate that as well.
Oh, they said the honor is ours. I mean, I've really enjoyed this. There's so much good stuff in here, and yeah, I just want to thank everyone else for joining us on Overheard at Career Ed Live.